Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Samuel Taylor Coleridge is considered a very important figure in English poetry. He was a great romantic poet, literary critic, and philosopher. Along with his poet friend William Wordsworth, Coleridge ushered in the Romantic movement in England. His autobiographical book, Biographica Literaria, was considered a significant theoretical work in which he combined philosophy and literary criticism in an interesting fashion. Coleridge is most remembered for his several awe-inspiring poems such as Kubla Khan, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and his unfinished poem Christabel. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a ballad which explores the guilt and psyche of an old sailor who narrates a mesmerizing tale of his old voyage on which he had killed an albatross. Let's listen to the first two parts of the poem now. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three, by the long grey beard and glittering eye. Now wherefore stoppest thou me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayest hear the merry din. He holds him with his kinny hand. There was a ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, grey-beard loon. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbour cleared. Merrily did we drop, below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he, and he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon. The wedding guest here beat their breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. The bride had placed into the hall, red as a rose is she. Nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. The wedding guest he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his overtaking wings, and chased us south along. With sloping mast and dipping prow, as he pursued with yell and blow, still threads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The ship drove fast, loud rode the blast, and southward aye we fled. And now they came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice mast high came floating by, as green as emerald. And through the drifts the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It cracked and growled, and roared and howled, like noises in a swound. At length did cross an albatross, through the fog it came. As it had been a Christian soul, we hailed it in God's name. It ate the food it never had eat, and round it flew. The ice did split with a thunder fit, the helmsman steered us through. And a good south wind sprung up behind, the albatross did follow. And every day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. In midst of cloud, on mast or shroud, it perched for the vespers 9, whilst all the night through fog smoke white glimmered the white moonshine. God save thee, ancient mariner, from the friends that plague thee thus. Why lookest thou so? With my crossbow I shot the albatross. The sun now rose upon the right, out of the sea came he, still hid in mist, and on the left went down into the sea. And the good south wind still blew behind, but no sweet bird did follow, nor any day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work him woe. For all averred I had killed a bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, they said, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow. Nor dim nor red like God's own head, the glorious sun upraised, then all averred I had killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. It was right, said they, such birds to slay that bring the fog and mist. The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into the silent sea. Down dropped the breeze, the sails dropped down. It was sad as sad could be, as we did speak, only to break the silence of the sea. All in a hot and copper sky, the bloody sun at noon, right up above the mast did stand, no bigger than the moon. Day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Ye slimy thing did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. About and reel and rout, the death fires dance at night. The water like a witch's oil, burnt green and blue and white. And some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. And every tongue through utter drought was withered at the root. We could not speak no more than if we had been choked with sooth. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young! Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. Let's now understand the first 2 parts of the poem in detail. As the name suggests, the poem is the rhyme or verse of an old sailor or mariner. In part 1, the mariner stops a wedding guest and narrates an awe-inspiring account of his old sea voyage. He recounts how his ship was struck by a storm and carried towards the South Pole, where it got stranded. Thereafter, an albatross came near his ship. With its arrival, the wind began to blow, which helped the ship to move again. However, in an impulse, the mariner killed the albatross one day. The poem opens up with the old mariner stopping one amongst the three young men going to a wedding. The wedding guest wonders why he has been stopped by a weird old man with a long beard and an arresting gaze. Irritated by this intrusion, the guest tells the mariner that the wedding is about to begin. The feast is set. The guests have come in and merrymaking sounds can be heard. The guest also states that he is one of the important family members of the bridegroom and so has to leave. Despite this, the old mariner holds the wedding guest with his skinny hand and begins to talk about the ship. The wedding guest gets unsettled, calls the old mariner a lunatic and asks him to remove his hand, and the mariner removes his hand at once. However, we come to know in the third stanza that the mariner has hypnotized the wedding guest with his bright eyes, who then listens to him like a 3-year-old child. The wedding guest sits down uncomplainingly on a stone as he has no choice but to listen to the old man who begins to tell his tale. From the 6th stanza, the mariner narrates an old story about his sea voyage. He begins from the day when the ship he was on was cheered at the harbor. The ship passed under the church, the hills and the lighthouse near the shore and travelled comfortably into the cheerful sea. The repetition of the word below emphasizes the swift movement of the ship into the sea. In the next stanza, the mariner describes the regular rising and settling down of the sun in the sea. He narrates that with each passing day, the sun seemed to appear higher in the sky and eventually it could be seen shining over the mast during noontime. The position of the sun suggests that the ship was passing through the equator. Just then, the narration of the mariner is interrupted by the wedding guest who beats his breast or expresses his helplessness as he hears the bassoon, a musical instrument which signaled the beginning of the wedding ceremony. The narrator of the next stanza is either the poet Coleridge himself or the wedding guest who is imagining the wedding proceedings. The narrator describes that the beautiful bride has entered the wedding hall, and she follows the cheerful musicians and singers who are nodding their heads to the tune to their music. Again, the guest feels helpless as he has no choice but to listen to the mariner who has held him by the spell of his glittering eye. Meanwhile, the mariner continues with his tale. He describes that the weather changed due to a sudden storm blast, which was cruel and strong. The storm has been personified in these lines. The overtaking wings is a reference to powerful winds that drove the ship towards the South Pole. In the next stanza, the poet uses hyperbole or exaggeration to poetically depict how the storm chased the ship. It yelled and pursued the ship, which bent its head forward and forged ahead still under the shadow of its enemy. Moving fast, the ship fled from the storm and reached the South Pole or Antarctica. The South Pole was engulfed in mist and snow and was awfully cold. Moreover, icebergs as high as the mast of the ship and as green as an emerald were floating in the water. The mariner recalls that the icebergs cast a gloomy brightness on the floating ice. Stuck in this strange land, the ship and its crew were the only living things to be seen. In the next stanza, the reception of the word ice emphasizes the overwhelming presence of ice in the landscape. There was ice all around, and when the ice chunks broke and banged against each other, they produced animal-like sounds similar to the ones made by a person during a fit. In this stanza, Coleridge uses onomatopoeic words like crack, growl, roar, and howl for the sounds made by ice. In the next stanza, the old mariner recounts the arrival of the albatross, who emerged from the thick fog. Everyone on the ship saw the bird as a good omen and hailed it in God's name. The crewmen gave it good food and it flew all around the ship. The albatross proved to be a harbinger of good luck, as the ice parted and the helmsman was able to steer the ship from the South Pole. Now, a favorable south wind propelled the ship ahead, and the lucky albatross also followed it. It got friendly with the sailors and came to them whenever it was called. The mariner further recalls that during the evening church service time, the albatross either sat on the mast of the ship or on the sails, irrespective of the misty or cloudy weather. These lines reinforce the albatross as a Christian symbol. In the next stanza, we get a sense that the mariner has stopped his story very abruptly. Therefore, the wedding guest prays that the old mariner be saved from the evil spirits that are troubling him. He then asks the reason behind the strange expression on the old man's face. To this query, the mariner informs that he has shot the albatross with his crossbow. Let's now look at the second part of the poem now. In this part, the ship moves away from the Antarctica and reaches a part of the ocean which is deathly still. The ship gets stuck in the rotting ocean, and the crew holds the old mariner responsible for their unfortunate condition because he had killed the albatross. Therefore, they hang the albatross from his neck. The second part begins with the mariner narrating the events that took place after he killed the albatross. The sun rose and set down as usual, although it was hidden by the mist. The south wind blew and helped the ship to move ahead. However, no sweet bird followed the ship or came at the call of the sailors. The mariner says that he had committed a hellish act which would bring trouble to everyone, because his crew members had firmly begun to say that he had done a wretched thing by killing the bird. It was the bird who had made the breeze blow. However, the crewmen changed their opinion very soon. They observed that the sun rose as usual and looked as beautiful as the halo behind God's hand. Going by this omen, they now believed that the albatross was unlucky as it had brought them fog and mist. The lines in this stanza depict the unsteady and fickle human nature. In the next stanza, the mariner recounts that the good breeze continued to blow and the ship moved ahead. There is alliteration in the line, "furrow followed free," which evokes the image of a plough creating a furrow in land. This is also a hyperbole, or exaggeration. Just like a plough, the ship moved smoothly in the tideless sea, cutting the water and forming a furrow of white foam behind it. Thereafter, the ship entered a usually silent part of the sea. At this place, the sails came down as there was no wind. It was a sad place where only the voices of the crew broke the gloomy silence of the sea. This place was also unbearably hot. The extreme heat is conveyed by phrases like hot and copper sky and bloody sun. In fact, these phrases also bode bad luck, which follows the ship and its crew later on. The mariner recounts that a lot of days passed and the ship was still stuck at that place. There was also neither a sign of another life nor movement. The ship and the ocean were so still that they seemed to be a part of a painting. In this stanza, passage of time is emphasized by the use of repetition in the line day after day, day after day. In the next stanza, the mariner laments over the irony of the situation. He says that there was seawater everywhere around the ocean, the ship, but ironically, there was no fresh water to drink at all. The standing water of seamed, rotting and slimy creatures could be seen moving on its surface. He remembers that at night, the crew could see the death fires dancing on the ship. Moreover, the water of the sea seemed colorful like the magical oil of witches. The phrase death fire can be a reference to St. Elmo's fire, which is an electrical weather phenomenon taking place due to electricity discharged from pointed objects such as the mast of the ship. Both death fire and colorful water indicates bad omen. In the next stanza, the mariner says that some crew members thought that the curse of a spirit had befallen on them. The spirit was that of the albatross, which had emerged from the depths of the sea on 9 fathoms deep and followed them from the land of mist and snow. The mariner narrates the horrifying condition of the sailors on board in the next stanza. Their throats were parched and they could not speak a word. In fact, it seemed as if their mouths had been choked with soot. In the last stanza of part 2, the mariner narrates that he began to get evil looks from old and young members of the crew. As a painful reminder of his cruel and wrongful action, the crew took off the cross from the mariner's neck and instead hung the dead albatross there. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a ballad in which Coleridge uses many archaic English words like kin, couth, loon, eftsoons, to name a few. These words inspire wonder, fear, mystery, and create a supernatural atmosphere. They also give an ancient feel to the events narrated by the mariner. The poem works with several themes such as sin and redemption and respect for nature. The mariner commits a sinful act by killing the albatross, which is a symbol of Christian spirit and is also a being of nature. He is haunted by the guilt of this fact, and when the ship gets stranded, all the crew members believe that the mariner is responsible for their unfortunate condition. The supernatural elements also play an important role in the poem and are conveyed in many ways. For example, the mariner has a glittering eye with which he hypnotizes the wedding guest. The albatross is alternatively seen as a good omen and a bad omen. Moreover, when the ship is stranded, death fires are seen dancing in the night, and the ocean water is referred to as a witch's oil. Coleridge has also used several figures of speech such as alliteration, metaphor, personification, and simile in the poem. Alliteration, or repetition of a consonant, can be seen in lines such as, "By thy long grey beard and glittering eye," "He holds him with his skinny hand," "The wedding guest here beat his breast," and "The merry minstrelsy," to name a few. The poet also makes comparisons using metaphors and similes. The example of a metaphor is, "And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannously and strong." Notice that in this line, the storm has also been personified or described in human terms, using the pronoun he. Similarly, the sun has also been personified in the poem. The poet uses similes to draw comparisons. For example, he compares the bride with a rose, the wedding guest with a 3-year-old child, sounds of cracking ice with noises in a fit, or swound and the sea water with witch's oil. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is thus a multi-layered poem which explores the idea of guilt and its psychological effects and the importance of loving nature and all its beings.